Good morning. It is morning where I live, and so I wish you good morning wherever you are in the world. Uh, I noticed when I looked back at these uh, streaming things, I noticed you see virtually all of my apartment. I told you how small it was. When I shut the doorknob gets in bed with me. But you can see how small it is. Over my left shoulder, you can see the kitchen. That's just that little section there. That's all there is. There's no stove. There is a refrigerator and a microwave, and that's about it. And some cabinets. That's my little coffee pot over there and cup and stuff. And then over my right shoulder, on the right side, you see a little blue down here in the corner. Let's see if I can get yeah, right there. That's my bed. You see my bed and into part of the bathroom there. And, and that's about it. It's really small, but it's just perfect for me. And these pictures up here, of course, that one uh, picture of my wife, that was her engagement picture at the age of 17. And then the other picture, she and I together, we were in our 70s. That kind of oval picture on the bottom there was taken in about 1929 or 30 because that's my father on uh, the right, my grandmother on the left, and my great grandmother is sitting in front of them holding me, and I was just a newborn baby. And they were showing 4 generations in that picture, but that's an old picture. Anyway, and that you see my TV there that I never watch, never turn it. Well, sometimes I do. We sometimes watch a movie, my son and I. We'll sometimes watch a movie or something on YouTube or something, but I never watch the television stations at all. Uh, I guess I really need to tell you that uh, when rock and roll music first began to take over the airwaves on the radio, I didn't like it at all. I thought it was ugly music. I like pretty music. And so I quit listening to popular music. I switched to the classical stations from then on, the early 50s. And I never, even to this day, listened to popular music. Never have since rock and roll came on. Uh, I know I offend a great many people when I tell you that I can't stand rock and roll and I can't stand country music. I just, I avoid them both if I possibly can. Sometimes you can't escape. But anyway, I just wanted to tell you that. And one more thing about music. I, uh, if you can see that angle wall right there, and you see that picture on that wall, that's a collage. It's made with pictures and memorabilia. Uh, when I got in my first opera, uh, my wife gathered my acceptance letter and a copy of my first paycheck, and there were 3 photographs of me in my costume as I was in that opera. I played a peasant in the first scene, and I think it was the third scene before I came back and played the part of a soldier. So I had those two. You have your own dressing room and everything, and I sang in a couple of operas, and in one, and the principals that did the main characters were brought in by the Dallas Opera Association to sing those roles from the Metropolitan Opera Company. So I met and sang on stage with some of the greatest singers ever in the world. And that was quite an honor to be in the chorus with those people. But the other thing I wanted to say about music is that when I think I was about 45 when I found out about the Dallas Symphony Chorus. I think it had just started, and I think I heard their first performance. And I told my wife when we heard it, I said, I want to be in that chorus. And about the next fall, I saw an opportunity to audition. And so I went down and I sang two songs, one in Italian and one in English. They were classical songs. And they gave me a piece of music that I'd never seen before and asked me to sing it. So I read the music. I could read music. And I sang that music. And then in a few minutes, they gave me a music theory test. And that is, you have to know what every little mark on a piece of sheet music means and how it affects the music. Well, I knew all that. My grandfather taught me that when I was a little kid. And I've known that all my life. So I could sight read and take music theory. I knew all about music theory. Let's see. I'm trying to read some of these remarks. My goodness, some from Denmark. Good morning, everybody. I appreciate your comments. Thank you very much. But when I got in the Dallas Symphony Chorus, I was about 45, and I hadn't sung in a chorus since high school. I sang in church, but that's not like singing classical music. And so it scared me to death to go down there and audition. Well, I was a little apprehensive. I can't say it scared me because I've never had stage fright in my life. I've been before an audience since I was 4 years old, all the time, and it never bothers me to be before an audience or to speak to people. I've preached to a couple of thousand, 3,000 people one time. And so crowds don't bother me at all. And it doesn't bother me to audition either. But once you get in the Dallas Symphony Chorus, you're not in except for that year. You have to re-audition every fall. And you have to sing two art songs, one in a foreign language. You have to take a sight reading test and a music theory test every fall. Well, I got in symphony chorus, the Dallas Symphony Chorus. I think I sang with them 14 straight years. And I sang in symphony choruses in other states where I lived. And I think that I sang in symphony choruses about 35 years or so of my life up till I was age 77, because that's when I lost my voice, singing voice for 10 years. But anyway, I wanted to tell you about having to audition. Uh, I'll tell you more about auditioning. I've had a recent experience that I'll share with you, but that'll be in a later program. But back to art. Uh, some of you have asked about my paintings and drawings and things, and I really wasn't much of a painter. I could paint, and my paintings were pretty good, I think. But uh, painting wasn't my thing. Commercial art was my thing. I was a designer. Had a very creative mind, and creativity is the name of the game in commercial art. And I was gifted with that, and I made quite a good living uh, doing that work. Uh, but all of that commercial art is just trash. You do it for the newspapers and the magazines, and they get thrown away, and flyers and billboards, and they get changed. So I always felt like that being a commercial artist was one of the most useless jobs a person could have. But I loved every minute of it. I loved to do it. And it was, to me, it was not work at all. It was great fun. I had fun every day, all day long. I didn't work at all for about 35 years in art. And, and I only painted probably in my life, I probably only painted about 20 or 25 paintings at the most. And I gave some away. I sold some. And when I retired and we moved into a small complex, my wife and I gave my paintings to my children. So they're scattered all over the country. My daughter has several in Seattle, Washington, and my son in Lubbock, Texas has at least 3, maybe 4. And my other children have the rest of the paintings. I do have 4 still, and I may figure out a way to show them to you. Uh, over my right shoulder, no, my left shoulder, is the living room. There's enough room for a love seat, a couple of end tables with lamps and a coffee table, and above that uh, love seat, I have a painting. It's a 24 by 32. It's that big, and I use it on my sites on YouTube and my karaoke site and my Facebook and all of that. I use that a picture of that painting on those sites, and you can see it there, at least most of it. And it's a copy back, I think it was in around 1990, somewhere in there. I watched a program that talked about how artists were doing copies of old masters and selling them for $50,000-$60,000. Well, the old masters that hang in the museums are worth millions of dollars. And I thought, my goodness, I can copy anything. And so I began to do copies of French Impressionist paintings. I did a couple of Monets and a Renoir. I did two Pizarros, Camille Pizarros. I did a Cezanne, and I've forgotten. I think there were six artists that I did copies of their work, but and I didn't try to sell them. I knew they weren't worth anything because those people, those artists that did those copies and sold them for large amounts of money, they went to the museums and copied straight from the painting so that their brush strokes and their colors were absolutely right when they did those. Well, I couldn't do that. I found a calendar that had some pictures, about 8 by 10, pictures of those, some of the artists. And so I painted these paintings from those photographs. And so my brush strokes were the best I could figure out from looking at a small photograph. And photographs are not always as true in color as they should be, or as the originals are. They're not anywhere near like an original. Color photographs aren't. But anyway, that's another story to talk about printing and color. But that big painting is hanging over that love seat. It has a gold leaf frame around it. And then I have two small 8 by 10 paintings that hang there. They're very small. I could probably take them down and show you those one day, but they were just studies that I did as an experiment. In 1971, I read 3 books about the technique of the old masters' paintings. And to tell you, that's hard. Most people don't understand what's involved in things like this. But when modern art came along, abstract art, to me, that was people that couldn't draw well. That's just a mess to me. Anyway, there were some men that became very famous abstract artists, and their pictures were selling for millions of dollars. And I read in an art magazine that the way they painted, their paintings didn't last. The paint began to crack and fall off of the canvas. And they, in this article I read in American Artist magazine, said that the old masters, their paintings look as fresh as if they were painted yesterday or that morning. And they're still good, and they don't crack, and they don't fall off of the canvases. And those books explained the technique, the chemicals, and the method that they used, the old masters used to do oil paintings. Oil painting is only about 700 years old. Jan van Eyck and his brother were the inventors of it. I saw Van Eyck when I lived in Washington, D.C. It was a little 8 by 10 painting, but I've never seen anything in such detail. The colors were still, this is one of the first oil paintings ever done in history. And it looked as fresh as if the paint looked wet. It was just, the colors were vivid and the detail was incredible in that painting. And and there's wasn't a crack in it. And I thought, well, I need to learn that technique. And so I did a study of that and made some notes, and I went and bought the proper materials and the right kind of paint and the medium and all that. And and so those two little paintings were experiments using that technique. And I wanted to see if I could do it. And so those are just little copies of some pictures that I did just as a study to be sure I could do it. So I know that my paintings will last for hundreds of years, unless they're destroyed, of course. But they're not going to crack. They're not going to fall off the canvas. And someone asked last week about that painting of the sampan that I talked about. It still exists. My son in Lubbock has it and 2 or 3 other paintings. He has one that I did with painting knives that won second place in an art contest in a museum in Austin, Texas, one year, and it went on a year tour around the country in an art show. And but he has that, and he has the sampan painting hanging in his house in Lubbock, and another 1 or 2, I think, of my paintings. And another son has a Renoir and a Monet. I think my daughter has the Monet. Anyway, I just don't have them anymore. But I have those 2 copies, and I have that 1 painting, and that really belongs to my youngest son. He's going to get it after I'm gone, which may be pretty soon. But anyway, then the other painting that I have in my apartment is a pastel painting. It's colored chalk, and it's a picture, a portrait I did of my wife before we married. We were dating, and we went out one day and out on a kind of a high mountain, and she sat down on a big rock, and I drew her picture, and then I colored it with the pastel colors. I drew her portrait, and I didn't think it was very good, and I was going to destroy it, and she wouldn't let me. And she's kept that all her life, all through our life, and I still have that drawing hanging over my bed today of her that I did. But those 4 pictures are all that I have. I do have a portfolio that it's a big thing, about 3 by 4 feet, and it's very heavy. I've got a lot of material in it. You carry your when you're a commercial artist, you take samples of your work and carry it in a portfolio, and you go to clients and to apply for looking for freelance work. You show them what you can do. Well, I may dig that out and try to show you that sometime, some of those things. But anyway, that's a little bit about art. Let's see what time it is. And let me see. I'm supposed to look. Oh, somebody's from Austin. That's where I grew up. I lived there from age 4 till I was about 22. And music auditions can be nerve-wracking. Well, they never bothered me. But you know, I've only failed 2 auditions. One of I think the first one that I did, I was pretty young, in my early 20s, I think. And the state fair has a theater, and they would bring shows down from Broadway shows down, and the principals would come from New York uh, to do these musical shows. And but they got the chorus from local talent, and so I went. I thought I'd see if I could get in the chorus, and I went to audition for that, and I started to sing, and they just waved me off. I probably didn't sing 3 phrases in a song. It didn't scare me. I wasn't. It had no effect on me. I just, I gave it a shot. That's all all you can do is just give it a shot. You'll never play if you don't go out for the team. If you have to go out for the team if you really want to play. And so that was always my idea. But anyway, speaking about art, uh, I bluffed my way yesterday. You remember, I bluffed my way into commercial art at Texas Instruments. And after I'd been there about 5 years, I found out about doing freelance art on the side. And I started doing some of that. Well, I was making 10 times the money freelancing than TI paid me. And I said, why in the world am I sitting here drawing and working for TI when I can get out there and I can make $10 an hour? And this was in 1958. And so I quit, and I went around to advertising agencies in Dallas, and I found artwork that I took home and did, and I began freelancing in 1958. I turned 28, I think, that year, something like that. Anyway, that's how I got into it. I kind of bluffed my way into that as well, but I was good enough, I guess, that I made it. I was busy all the time. I had lots of clients, made a great deal of money as a commercial artist. At one point, I stopped doing commercial artwork. I gave up a very lucrative business. I was in business for myself, and I gave that up because I felt like I wanted to be a preacher. That was a very large part of my life as well. I started preaching every Sunday when I was 19 at a little church out in the country. And I found part-time work like that. Sometimes they paid me a little, sometimes they couldn't. But I had preached ever since I was 19. And here I was about 28 or so. And I decided I'd go into full-time preaching. And I found a church that hired me. And I didn't make very much money. We had to really learn to budget our finances. But anyway, I did that for about 10 years. And I was preaching in El Paso at a church of about 500 members, I think. Anyway, my wife got ill, and the doctor said we needed to move to Dallas where she'd get better medical treatment. So we packed up. I quit my job and I had no visible means of support, uh, of income. And we piled our belongings into a couple of U-Hauls and we made a trip to Dallas. And my wife said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to go back into freelance art." And I was very confident. She said, "You think you can do that? You haven't done it for 10 years and your portfolio is 10 years old." And I said, "Don't worry about it." I said, if I can't make $1,000 a week uh, in about 2 or 3 months, I wouldn't be trying." And I felt very confident that we'd be just fine. And so we moved, and I don't know how she rented a big 2-story house with 5 bedrooms and 3 baths and all that without an income, but she managed. She went to Dallas and rented a big house for our big family. We had 6 kids, and and so we moved in there, and I started looking for freelance work. I found work immediately, and it wasn't but about a month or so before I picked up IBM as one of my clients, and I did illustrations for their books. And when I went back into art, I thought it was going to be about $10 an hour, and I thought I could make $1,000 a week at $10 an hour. This was in about 1975, I think. Anyway, I I learned that the rate had changed dramatically for freelance art. You got $25 an hour for just paste up and production art, preparing art for the printer. And you got $50 an hour for design, layout, and design work. And you got $100 an hour for illustrations. And so it wasn't 3 months till I was making, $500, $600, $700 a day as an artist. And I made a very good living for about 35 years in that field. I don't really have a lot to say about art. I enjoyed doing it. Computers came along in the late 80s, and that's what drove me out of business. That and the oil crunch. Actually, I got caught in some financial situations in my business, and we went dead broke. Had to declare Chapter 7 bankruptcy, my wife and I, and start all over. And I was about 60 and she was about 58. And when we had to start all over from scratch. And that's when I went back into full-time preaching. And I preached the rest of my life after about 1980. And so that's a different story. Anyway, I've talked long enough today, and if you have some questions, let's see. Well, this gift that I had at birth and have involves creativity. The name of the game in art, commercial art, is being creative. The more creative you are, the better you get, better you do. I played with the big boys in Dallas. I had studio in a high rise in the Prestonwood Tower building on the 7th floor. It's a 14-story building. And so I was quite successful in doing that. But I was run out of business and I did go bankrupt. I was a terrible money manager in the first place. I never understood money. But anyway, the computers ran me out of business, and I had the hates for computers. And I thought the work, and I still do, artwork that is done on a computer, to me, is schlock work. It's not anywhere near as good as an artist can do by hand. You're limited by the computer, by what an electronic thing can do and can't do. And when I sat down at a drawing board, there was no limit to what I could do. And I think the artwork that was done by hand, even the Disney things that are done on computers, they're all quite good, but that's not real art. Real art was the way Disney did it in the beginning, with drawings by people who knew how to draw. And it's a shame that art has gotten into the condition that it has, to me. But I'll tell you something else maybe tomorrow. I'm not sure. Saturdays, I get very busy on Saturday and Sundays. I've got appointments. I've got things to do today, and tomorrow I'll be busy. I'm not sure I'll even be able to sing on YouTube tomorrow. My schedule is very tight on the weekends. But until next time, thank you for watching. I appreciate your comments, and perhaps I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.